Welcome to the Your Message Received podcast. And now, taking your message to the finish line, your host, John Duffin.
Hey folks, John Duffin here with Duffin Media. Welcome back to another episode of Your Message Received. Your Message Received is the home, the place, the platform to help you find your best, your most true, authentic business voice. Hell, make it your best voice. Get what you want, find what you need, improve your results, meet the person of your dreams, make billions of dollars. We're not quite guaranteeing those last two yet. We are really on the case, though, to make sure that's happening. And the reason I can get away with that sort of chat is simply because we bring people on who absolutely walk the walk. And today is no exception. We got some fun numbers to throw around. We've got some great case studies to throw around. But really, I got a great guy that I've just had the pleasure to begin to know. And Zach Carlin, who is from the Summit Chasers Network, or as they say, breaking ceilings and building empires, arrives to us via Arkansas by way of Canada and Las Vegas. Zach, great to have you here, man.
So great to be here. That was a great introduction. You got me fired up with the billions, and I've already met the one with the girl.
We're so close to
one
being able to
checked
guarantee.
off. Let's go. Super happy to be here.
That part is great. And look, folks, if you're following on social media, you probably have seen a sudden burst of information from Zach, which has been great fun for me as well. But I always like a little bit of a backstory before we're just like randomly throwing millions and millions and hundreds of personnel and flips and all that sort of thing. Talk to me, because I love the fact that I do want to hear again. We had a great pre-call, folks, by the way. It's a shame you weren't around for it. So
that could have been that would have been a great podcast. This one will be better.
Honest to God. Honest to God, but hey, that's the mission, is to make this one even better. So for me, I'm always curious. You're a former athlete, 3 sports in. What got you started?
Ooh, what got me started in sports?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm from a small town. Initially, what got me started in sports was just, I'm from a small town in Canada. Country kid, 900 people. There's about 28 people in my graduating class. So it was either sports or the alternative was drugs and trouble and that kind of stuff. So ideally, up until I was about 16, 17, I chose the sports. So again, Canada. So I came out of the womb in skates, right?
Right.
I was the youngest of 6 that I know of. And I was kind of my dad's last chance to have a kid to go to the NHL. So he really pushed hockey, really pushed fitness. And I had a personal trainer by the time I was 13. But before that, I mean, I was a black belt in karate by the time I was 8. Actually, we want to go way back. I don't know if it's a sport, but my first soiree into physical anything was tap dancing. So there is a video of a 3-year-old Zach out there somewhere tap dancing. And hopefully it's got dust and it's in a trunk somewhere.
Well, listen, I'll ease your mind. Our research team did not find that video. So whatever you've done to hide it, you did well. You did
Beautiful.
Good.
Beautiful.
Buddy of mine who also happens to be a high performance coach and is my high performance coach, Dave Scatchard, is also from a small town in Canada. And I love when anyone says, played in the NHL for, I believe it was 14 years, and tells me the crazy stories, because it is Canada and small towns, the ways the dads are all in regards to that. My question to you is this: who was more all in at the time, your dad or you?
Oh, my dad, for sure. 100%. He was, you're going to go to the NHL, kid. You're going to do this and that. And I just wanted to start doing mixed martial arts. I wasn't much of a team. I was a good team player, but I didn't like having to rely on them to get the result. Right. I like training on a team, pushing each other, going for a result together. But being on the ice, if I could have the best game of my life, but it wouldn't matter. Right. If everybody else was, or I could have a terrible game, but somehow still get a win, which I didn't deserve, type of thing. So I wasn't much of the team guy, but no, he was the one. He was the one.
It's interesting because I mean it's either one of the two. Certainly, like I said, small towns. Dave talks about like literally being drugged at like 8 or 10 and being drugged hundreds of miles and all that sort of thing. When were you, because it was more of your dad, when were you able to let it go? And what kind of a fight ensued in regards to the letting go part?
Yeah. So I maybe didn't do it as eloquently, politically correct as I should
Mhm.
have at the time, as most 17-year-old kids do, especially early 2000s. No, so I just outright quit playing hockey, and then that's when again there was two options in a place
Mhm.
like that. There were
Mhm.
sports or drugs, and I made the poor decision. Was around the wrong people. That was my first big lesson: is
Mhm.
you are who you surround yourself with, and I ended up by the time I was 17, I almost 18, I was homeless, and uh drugs were my choice at the time. So that was
How
kind of
fast
what's
did they beat you up?
oh once it's like anything. Once you make the decision to go all in, right, the
Mhm.
results happen quick. I made the decision to go all in on quitting everything, and that's what I did. So it had happened very, very quickly. Because again, once I was out of the house, again, there's not a lot of in a small town like that, everybody knows, right?
Mhm.
So everyone's pointing the finger, everyone knows. So I can't go to the gas station, grocery store, the diner, whatever it is, and everyone knows, right? So it happened, which just well, you almost circle quicker then because you feel so alone, right? And I did. So I ended up moving away from Claresholm to a town called Morin, and it was right on a highway. And that highway, it kind of went right up the Rocky Mountains, and it was called the Crow's Nest Pass. And the part that I lived on was controlled by the Hell's Angels. So we ended up it was everything was very accessible at that time. It's not as badass and cool. Like if anybody's seen Sons of Anarchy, it wasn't like that. But it wasn't that cool. But yeah, so it happened really quick. It happened really, really quick. It
Mhm.
was not long after that I had turned 18, and then so I turned 18 in March, and then by the time June came around, I was living on a playground for the most part.
What got you out? Not just out of the
Actually,
playground, but what got you out of being grabbed at like that?
so I had a boxing coach, and I to this day still
Mhm.
don't know his last name. His name was Gord, and it's
Just scored.
Like a Pixar character named Gord,
Oh.
right? And he had he rougher guy, right? He in the city, Calgary, Alberta. He was a bouncer at a club, and that club shared a parking
Mhm.
lot with Knuckles, which was my MMA gym that I would train at, and he would go and train there too. He was a boxing coach there, and he was my boxing coach, and he comes and finds me, and I had a typical park that I was at, and I wasn't in a slide. I was in one of those like horizontal tube things, ones like really staticky that makes your hair stand up.
Oh,
And as I
okay.
was laying in one of those, and he comes up and he kicks my leg really hard. I can still
Ooh.
feel it in my calf. And he's like, what are you doing, man? Like, what are you doing? I'm like, he's like, get a job, go do this, go do that. I'm like, when you're so low, just getting a
Mhm.
job seems so high. So it seems so
Yeah.
out of reach, out of reach. There's so many steps in between, right? So I was like, man, I'm not gonna do this. He's like, man, let's just go buy you a shirt. Let's just go buy a damn shirt. That thing's disgusting. So
Mhm.
we went to the bargain store, went to the bargain store and spent I can't remember how much we spent, $3.50. It was a red shirt, and I that's what started it. And then I got the shirt, I cleaned myself up a little bit. I luckily had a connection at the swimming pool, so I ended up getting a job as a lifeguard in the swimming pool. And funny enough, I don't know if we shared this before, but that the swimming pool was attached to the same building as well, it was called the care center, which is the addictions unit, where I had been not much longer before that. So I was a lifeguard at the swimming pool at the addictions unit that I had been to. So that was an interesting interesting combination.
So, Zach, it's such a small town that the addiction center is connected to the pool, which what is catty corner to Knuckles, where we say the K.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, exactly.
if it ain't the brand, it needs to be
Yeah,
Knuckles, where we say the K.
yeah.
Um, that they're all basically interconnected.
So the Knuckles was in the city. So luckily I
Okay,
didn't have anything to do with that. So that was good. That was an hour and a half drive.
right.
But the addiction center, the swimming
Hmm.
pool, and the other actually there's two hospitals that were kind of connected to it. They
Hmm.
were all in the same building.
Did it take the first time for you?
No, no. Well, no, no. I would say no, if I'm being honest with myself. So I had moved. But what really got me out of it for good was
Yeah.
fighting, was competition, was sports.
Mhm.
Because I had started boxing and stuff again, and while I was doing my lifeguarding, you know, I got a little bit of money so I could travel back and forth to the city. I was really taking care of myself. I got in really physically really good shape, and I started competing, and that's what got me out of it. So that's what I attached to. Like, this is all I can do, right? This is what I'm supposed to do because this is what got me out of it. So when that happened, I was traveling back and forth. I thought I was hot shit in Canada, right? So I was doing well. I had a couple of amateur fights, and then I decided I had a sister that just moved to Las Vegas, and I was 19, almost 20, the later year of 19, and I said, well, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it. And I kind of wanted to get out of the town anyways, because the town had a sour taste in its mouth because, again, everybody knows everything. I could go to the grocery store, and it was hard on my parents too, because, you know, they're like, everyone's like, oh, how's Zach? Oh, it's too bad, and that kind of stuff. So so I got out of there and I moved to Las Vegas before I had even turned 20, and I started fighting professionally in Las Vegas. So small town of 900 to Viva Las Vegas.
God almighty, where I didn't think it could get bigger, but in 2023, it just feels like everything is going there and everybody's going there.
Crazy. It was, I think it was 21 or 22. It was the fastest growing city in the US.
Yeah, and I'm
nuts.
gonna say, I venture a guess, it still is.
It's
You know
nuts.
what I mean? It's like people now go there to stay as opposed to go there to do something, be something, or whatever.
Yeah.
What's it like fighting in Vegas?
Not as cool as it sounds. Probably. No, it was good. So that was back when the sport, like mixed martial arts, everyone, you know, the UFC. No, I never fought in the UFC. It was in its rougher days, right? There was no drug testing. You know, you didn't have to have amateur fights. Now you have to have amateur fights before you turn pro, and you have to be able to pass certain tests and that kind of stuff. So that was just, if you wanted to, hey, you need some money, there's an opening on a card over here at you know, South Point or whatever, you know, you want to hop on. And it was fun. I met some great people. There was, and I was in a really cool gym, Extreme Couture. If anybody follows the sport, he's a legend of the sport, Randy Couture.
That's Randy Couture, right? So yeah,
Randy Couture, yeah. So it's his gym. So I there were some amazing people in that gym. So it was really cool to see the success, like be surrounded with some success, even if it was in, you know, combat, cage combat. But it was fun. I will say it was fun. It's not what it was cracked up to be. It's a small community. It was never like under the lights and there was, you know, the dancers everywhere. It was nothing like that. It was very underground. Hush, hush. You know, here's $500 for showing up. If you win, here's another 250 or $400 or whatever it was. But it was a grind, and that's where I probably a lot of my resilience came from. Because also just living in Vegas, if you can survive in Vegas as a 19, 20-year-old, 21-year-old kid, you know, you can navigate most things.
And you're sober at this point.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. So a 19, 20, 21-year-old kid who is like recently sober and navigating that town, that's a lot of doing.
Yeah, it was a lot. So when you asked it, was I like, how many did it take the first time? It took with, it didn't consume me. Like, that wasn't my identity kind of thing.
Right.
But I had, you know, it did, you know, there were some recreational things happening, but now
Well, that was Vegas, and that was then. By the way, I'm always duly impressed with the fact, like I said again, you kept your ears, which is nice.
Yeah, I had a sister. My sister that I moved with, she was a nurse, so she would drain my ears all the time. Yeah, so she would notice it, and she would just like like nurses back then had needles everywhere, so she would just like drain it.
Perfect.
So yeah, it was great. So I still have a little bit of issues with the back part of my ear still, but no, other than that, it's fine.
Yeah, I was saying, you don't look like I remember, God, it was 25. It had to have been 25 years ago, easy, where a friend of a friend brought in videos of cage fighting or whatever, and two things. Number one, I thought it was the craziest thing I'd ever seen. It was just, nobody looks like now, where everyone is shaved and buff and perfect. They just look like dudes, right?
They were, yeah.
And as you said, oh, hey, we got an opening if you wanted to come in. And look, and with the two guys that were there, I'm assuming that the guy that brought the videos, like I said, the guy that brought the videos was straight. I'm not. And I remember watching and I'm thinking, this is insane to me.
Mhm.
Now, like you said, every night's a Super Bowl, whether it's
Yeah.
Dana White or the crew and all that stuff. But you got exposure to success. You saw certain things, whether it was the caliber of the gyms, whether it was just the caliber of the people at them. And would you say, is that when in your mind your business started to, like in your mind, is that
Mhm.
what moved you into more of a business
That
vantage point rather than
definitely,
sports?
yeah. So it was really seeing Randy Couture because he was still competing at the time. So he was still fighting.
Right.
I think maybe he just lost the heavyweight title to Brock Lesnar,
Mhm.
but seeing him, like, he had other stuff. He was acting. That was
Mhm.
his
I
gym. So he was
remember.
obviously a business owner, right? Yeah. He
Mhm.
was in the Expendables and that kind of stuff.
Yep.
He owned the gym. He owned, clothing lines and
Mhm.
supplements and that kind of stuff. So he was a businessman. So I was open. I got to see that, okay, you can do other stuff. Like, they're just not,
Mhm.
that's not all we are. That's not all you are
Mhm.
when you do something like this, when you're an athlete. So that was really cool. But also I had, I fought maybe 11 times in 3.5, 4 years, right?
Right.
So, and I think the most I made at one, I got like a $4,000 to show and a couple more to win. So then that was the most I ever won. So if I'm only fighting 3, 4 times a year, you're only making 30K a year before taxes, right? So that's when I started doing strength and conditioning and personal training on the side. So that's when I kind of
Mhm.
got, a little bit of a business mindset, like at least having some sort of organization and pricing and bundling and that kind of stuff. So that was when I really, that's when it started. I think that's when, at least, the possibilities, the fact that I had evidence that I could do it
Mm.
at that point, right?
Mm.
Right. I I wasn't confined to a box anymore. At least I had evidence that there was another box that I could fit in.
I love that choice of words. So
Mm.
you had said earlier, like in terms of like when you're a kid and you're playing hockey and you didn't feel like yourself as much of a team player. When did you start? Because obviously these are not all solo projects. I mean, even when you're first starting out, when did you get the courage to bring someone else into your, even as you said, the evidence, to, if nothing else, to show the evidence to somebody? What
Mhm.
was that like?
It was fighting. So we would have, like, team practices. So we had team pro practices
Mhm.
4 nights a week, and that's when everybody was there beating the shit out of each other, right? So, but we
Fun.
were doing it. But we were doing it because we wanted to get each other better. When we
Right.
got in the ring, we were on our
Mhm.
own. Like, we
Mhm.
had our trainers and stuff, but they weren't in there. The cage was locked. There was just us. There was just us two and a ref,
I
right?
don't mind you.
But the team camaraderie in preparation for it
Mhm.
was intoxicating, right? The support
Mm.
that you got, the
Mhm.
support that you got, it almost seemed more at that point. If you ask me what's more of a team sport, hockey, football, or mixed martial arts, I would probably say mixed martial arts, because a lot of times the bond that you have with those people, because you're beating the
Mhm.
hell out of each other,
Yeah.
but you're doing it, and you're exposing. Your job is to expose their weaknesses so they can get better, which I
Gotcha.
feel that's like the true definition to me as a friend
Mhm.
or somebody who wants the best for you, right? So where in hockey, like, you'll do things to kind of, okay, they suck over here, so I need to make up for it, or we need to make up for it over here, or we need to
Mhm.
sign somebody else so they can make up for it, right? So, and I'm not saying they're absolutely team sports, but I was convinced that, like, okay, no, this is a team, right? We're gonna beat the hell out of you, expose your weaknesses, get you better, but we want what's best for you, right? So
As like
that,
almost like family.
yeah, thanks, yeah,
Like
pretty
the
much,
classic
yeah,
definition of what like family at its best
yeah,
is, you
yeah,
know?
exactly.
So would you say that was this for not just the first time, but the sense of, you obviously had guts.
Mhm.
You can't not have guts when you're homeless in a small town, or when you're moving to Vegas, or you're doing that, you know what I mean? Beating the
Yeah.
hell out of each other. So obviously guts isn't an issue. But I guess the only question I would have is, as you were just now, again, the evidence, the camaraderie, what have you, were you always gutsy or was that mostly show?
Ooh, great question, John. I think that's to start, it was show.
Mhm. Okay.
I think it definitely to start it was show, because it was almost like I put a mask on because I felt that was all I could do.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So whether or not I had the guts or not, that was all I was capable of. So
Right.
it's like, well, I don't have any other options. So I'm going to put this mask on and march out right to
Mm-hmm.
the only path I can take. Right. So I think a lot of it was that. And I don't think you really truly find, if when you have, true guts
Mm-hmm.
to take those chances and make those decisions, until you have other decisions, until you have a safety net. And if you choose to go that way instead of your safety net, like that would be guts. Where I was just doing it because that's all I had. Like that's all I thought I had. Right. I could have done other stuff, but it's all I thought I had. So if I had to put on the
Yeah.
mask and I went down the same tunnel. But if I had a safety net, I can't sit here on this podcast and say I would have still done it. Right.
But it was because of the lack of the safety net. That's what
Yeah.
forced it, you're saying?
I 100%. Yeah.
I always wonder if you, like, I'll ask you just because you explained it so well, but that's not typically for me. I drop my guard, like the armor, and I still, like, for myself, I'm still removing the armor, but for myself, it's typically when I have no other choice, that's when that's typically how it goes. And
Mhm.
so I love the fact that you just amplified that point.
Mhm.
When was the first time you got, I'll say, an acknowledgement that you did the right thing?
Ooh, good question.
With the armor. Like,
Probably.
you're pulling the armor
Ye-
off and you're like, all right,
Yeah.
hell, fine. Okay, I'll do it. This is
Yeah.
really more like
Yeah.
me.
When I had choices, probably when I had to move back. So when I was 23-ish, I got injured. So I dislocated my hip, and then
Okay.
the promotion that I was fighting for dropped me because if you can't fight, you're not
Mhm.
worth anything. And then so I
Right.
had to move back to Canada. I got kicked out of the country,
Mhm.
and moved back to Canada. And I had other options. Right. I had gotten my GD at this point. I
Mhm.
had some experience. I was a man, more of a man now than I was, anyways. Right. I had a little bit more head on my shoulders, and I had the work ethic, and I had the grit and that kind of stuff. So
Right.
when I came back, I had options to. I could have went back to school. I could have got a pretty good job, all this kind of stuff, but I stuck with competing. Like I knew I wanted to compete
Mhm.
in something. I was very competitive,
Mhm.
very competitive. I knew I wanted to compete. I knew that I loved at the time. I loved, I mean, still do, but I loved fitness. I loved health and
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. So I was like, well, I'm used to going all in, so I went all in on CrossFit,
Mhm.
right? So I
Mhm.
moved back to the small town,
Mhm.
and then I made the trip back and forth to the city, and again, hour and a half drive all the time to train at the gym up there. Luckily, you can compete in CrossFit and make money, more money than I did in fighting by quite a bit. Um, and I did that. I competed, and for a few years, I didn't make a ton of money, but I made enough where I could invest. And then I invested into a gym, so I was a partner in a gym, and then that's when I got the profit loss statement from there. I thought, oh, I own a business. It should be make a ton of money. You're doing the math. There's like 200 members, $175 each. Oh, that's like $1 million. I'm good. Uh, not great math, but then when I got it, the profit and loss, I was like, oh, how do I make that number go up? So I started getting pretty obsessed with business. But when I finally got the aha, or this was the right decision, is when
Right.
we saw that number go up, and I
Mhm.
started understanding marketing a little bit better. Instagram started becoming a thing, so I was utilizing that, and I had a following at the time, pretty big. Like at the time, if you have 10,000 followers back in 2014, 15, like that was a
Mhm.
lot. That was a lot back then. Now it's like if you don't have a million, you're nothing kind of thing. But so I started to learn a lot of that kind of stuff, and I started getting
Mhm.
sponsors, and uh, those had strategic partnerships with
Mhm.
supplements and physiotherapists and massage therapists, and I was able to do a lot of that stuff. And it was right around 2015. I was, I think, seventh fittest man in the world at that point, like ranked like all in. Um, and that's when I know I had a gym. I was ranked there. I was traveling the world, France, Dubai, Brazil, competing, and that's when I was kind of like, okay, you made this. This is what you were supposed to do. You're
Mhm.
not just doing it because this is all you think you can do. Like this is kind of what
Mhm.
you're supposed to do, right? So that was probably it. That was a long-winded answer for that, but it is
No,
what
but
it is.
I love the narrative, because
Yeah.
the only other follow-up question would simply be, now, are other people getting in your corner? I mean, I'm a sap, so I'll ask, like your family, are they liking
Oh
what's
yeah.
going on at this point?
Oh
Are
yeah.
they
No,
seeing it too?
my parents are they're incredible. They're the
Great.
best grandparents. They're very supportive. They're my
Mm.
biggest fans. They traveled to my mom came to France with me when I was competing. Yeah, she
Well,
came to
Zach,
France
I'd have
with
come
me.
to France with you.
Yeah, I mean Nice is nice, right? Spelt the same and everything.
Right? But
So
your mom showing up is great.
yeah, so she would show up and I would have I mean probably what's more impressive is I had one of my favorite competitions I would ever do was in St. Cloud, Minnesota in September.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful area, but yeah,
Yep.
they would follow me to St. Cloud, Minnesota
Mhm.
to watch me compete. So they were
Mm.
big fans. So yeah.
What are some of the things your mom and dad taught you? Whether in regards to resilience and or authenticity and or
Yeah.
business acumen or whatever.
Yeah. So my dad big time like the work ethic thing. Like he was in the Navy.
Right.
He didn't have
Mm-hmm.
the easiest kind of upbringing. He worked incredibly hard. So he had like he doesn't listen to podcasts, so I'll just say it. So he lost his job. So he was a psych nurse. So he was in the Navy, came out,
Mm-hmm.
started a construction business, needed to make more money because he had 5 other kids. So he had to make a little bit more money. So he put
Yep.
himself through school while owning a construction business to be a psych nurse. And then he became a psych nurse. He was a psych nurse for 15, 20 years, met my mom, and then had me, and then lost his job and everything. Right. And to see how hard he worked was crazy. Like he restarted a construction business and he was a little bit older. Like he's 85 now. So at that time he was,
Nice.
mid 50s,
Right.
early 60s, running a construction business and doing a lot of it himself. So him taking me on job sites, seeing him dig up. I remember this. So, I don't know why I remember this so vividly, but
Yeah.
it's a core memory, I guess. Is one of the jobs he had, and there's only 2-man crew. It was him and one other guy. They had to lift up a house and move the foundation over, and he
A house.
like move the house over. Like they had to dig it up, move the house over. I mean, I don't know. I can't remember how they did it, but I remember that was the job.
Oh,
And he worked his ass off.
right.
And
I
so
mean, he's
that was
one dude.
yeah, no, he's crazy. It was him. Yeah, it was him and just one other guy on the crew, and he worked so hard. And it was that was probably it, right? Like, and he said anything worth doing is worth doing well. So
I think that's it's funny because it's like I'm a big believer in the sense that stuff typically comes from somewhere. And I mean, I would love to give everyone credit and think that everybody invented all this stuff exactly on themselves. But I love influences. Like, look, you've talked about your family, your friends. You've shared with me before as I'm looking. Folks, if you're listening to this, you'll have to just use your imagination. But if you're watching, like I said again, we were talking before in regards to Zach also being a voracious reader, of which a lot of strategic minds have that in common. Just because I'm staring at your books, I'm going to ask you more. I'm more interested just in terms of current tense. What are you reading? I'm jumping way ahead, but I'm always just curious. What are you reading lately that you're loving?
So
right now?
right now, so Patrick Bet David's new book just came out, Choose Your Enemies
Right.
Wisely. And it's so good. It's so good. And I liked his first book too, your Next 5 Moves. And it's so good. So good. I've been to his, he's like a mentor of like I pay for and I meet with him his team once a month. And he's so good as far as somebody who has a mission and a purpose and is audaciously, ferociously going after it. Right. And he's doing it with the intention of just making the world a better place, putting more warriors out there type of thing, right?
I love
so
that.
it's a great book so far. Another one, big fan. You can't really see it because this is in the way, but I'm a huge Jim Collins fan. Very big Jim Collins fan. It's interesting because when you're reading books, you notice that a lot of books these days you can tell there's like two. I kind of have them in 2 categories. There's the books that are there because the author genuinely cares about what they do and they want to get information out there. They want to educate. They want to influence. They want to positively influence, right? And then there's the ones who put out a book for marketing reasons, who just...
How do you know the difference?
You can tell with the intention of their writing, right? There's ones where they just talk about their framework, their product, really quickly their story, because there's a framework. Like there's a known framework out there that they use. Right.
Yep.
And I'm a huge fan of this guy, by the way, and I use a lot of his stuff in our own marketing and our B-cells and that kind of stuff. Is Russell Brunson. right? So he has all those different like webinar storytelling frameworks. You got something?
I got to tell you, oh my God, Russell Brunson was a tough person for me to follow. And I don't know if it was the speed in the way that he spoke. I saw Russell Brunson. They actually brought him back a second time at the same Grant Cardone 10X event. He was there the first day and they brought him back. And I guess it was the third day. And part of it, I believe, was it was as close to what I would think was a do-over. The guy's clearly brilliant and gifted and packs so much content and all of it good. I couldn't get right with the speed of it. And you know what I mean? And obviously now with Techie, just, you know what I mean? Just reduce the speed. But I had a really hard time, but honest to God, the people that are able to ride the ride with him, all clearly benefit in the funnels and all that, you know what I mean? The click and all that sort of thing. It's like, it's brilliant.
Yeah.
I want to use that to spring backwards, actually, which is this. I love the first big success story business-wise after the competition, and we're calling, I'll call it the $30 million flip, just because they're fun and it's a first. And a lot of people don't begin with 30 mil. So I just want to know, what is your recollection in regards to why you think that worked?
So to kind of there's some lead up to that. So I had owned about 6 gyms and flipped them, right? And during that time, I learned so much, right? I learned more about, you know, how important your network is, how important people are. I think the most important thing if you're a growing business or if you're a business in general is the people that are on your team and people that are in your life in general. And just taking care of the numbers, right? Looking at the numbers of being, they call it fanatically disciplined, right? When it comes to that kind of stuff. And then looking at impure, I can't remember what it is, Jim Collins in Great by Choice. And he said being fanatically, like almost like paranoid, something like that, like constructively paranoid, like always looking ahead, what's in the future, what's a strength and weakness of ours, what's a threat. So always kind of looking ahead, so paying attention to that kind of stuff. So I gained a lot of that just flipping small businesses, right? And then when I got into that business, which was a gym equipment company, it was actually a sponsor of mine that said, "Hey, you know, you got a kid on the way, right? Do you want this opportunity? We were doing this," and I was like, "Yeah, that sounds great." So when I got in, we were doing, or they were doing about 1.8 million, something like that, and then we started. Over the next 2.5, almost 3 years, we diversified, you know, our product line. We got into a lot of different ways of doing business. Instead of just selling equipment, we started leasing it to competitions and shows. They had a good foundation on their transportation because his mothership, I call it like a mothership company, right? Where this company was his passion project. So his mothership company was a freight and logistics. So we're able to utilize that a lot. So we're able to have a broader reach. So we started with a broader market, right? The capabilities of having a broader market anyways. And that's really important in Canada because the population density isn't much. So you have to be able to go really wide. So having that was huge, right? So I'll preface with that. And then I had a really good prep and competed. I was on billboards, that kind of stuff. I had a really good following and everything. So kind of all that put together, we had a very good base. We had a very, I wouldn't say base. We had a lot of potential, but we needed a base, right? So that's where the people, so important. That's the biggest thing, right? Get the right people, define what the right people are, define where you want to go, define what the right people are, and then get as many of them into your business as you can, right? Constructively. And then when you have the right people, if you identify the weaknesses in yourself, get the right people on board to fill those gaps, like almost success is like just it's going to happen sort of thing, right? So that was the big thing. So we went from 1.8 to just shy of 30 in about 2.5, 3 years with all those things going on.
I think that's such, it's a fun story for me to hear, to feel. I'm curious. You're obviously a detail person. You're obviously visionary, and I'm not just blowing smoke. That just sounds like such a suck up thing to say. But really, what I want to get at is, I keep going back to the guts, the resiliency, and the removing of the armor. And you keep talking about hiring people and finding the right people. Was that something that was easy for you? I know personally, it wasn't easy for me when I first began. I was awful at hiring people. And so what was it like for you as you're still removing personal armor? What was that like?
That was very difficult, actually, to start, because, like you said, I'm still removing armor, so therefore you have an ego, so therefore it gets in the way. So if I'm trying to
You're the
hire,
guy
like,
on the
ideally,
billboard.
exactly. So I'm trying to have, well, also, like, you get some, and I hate using this term, but you have that imposter syndrome, right? And you know, again, I don't like using that term because syndrome means that there's something wrong with you, and there's nothing wrong with you. You just have a weird perception on your capabilities, right? So it was hiring people who were better than me at certain things was hard. It was hard to do, right? The ego got in the way. So if I had a business, I needed to hire a very good coach. It was hard for me to admit, like, I need to bring on somebody who's better at coaching than me, because that's what I identified as being a good coach. But you have to be able to do those things, right? And then if again, even if down to like leasing, so we would lease some rooms, we would build rooms in some of these gyms and lease them to massage therapists and physiotherapists and that kind of stuff,
right?
And I would just put people in there who I thought had a good following, or I thought had a good customer base already, without okay, who are these people? Are they would they be willing to work with us? Are they the type of people that we want around our people? Are they the type of people that I want to be around, right? And you, unfortunately, you learn some of those the hard way, but the importance of having the right people around you is just it's crazy. But when you have the ego, when you're still new at these kind of things, and you're taking things at face value, you get burned. You get burned, and you just don't get as much out of it. But if you can put your ego aside and say, hey, my shortcomings are here, my business's shortcomings are here, and just see it as gaps that need to be filled, see it as kind of like skills that need to be increased, then it makes it so much easier. And then it's also easier for you to define who I need. Like, what does this person, not just the skills that they have or the characteristics, what does this person need to accomplish in that role? So that was and I learned those things over, a long period of time. It wasn't just flipping the gyms. This is something that, we were working on for a long time, but it initially it was, the ego, getting people better than you in, right?
And you, as you were the face, was that a case of like, what if, like, for me, it's, I remember early on, and more than early on, it took me a minute to get right with that. Like, it was more, well, what if they're any good? What if they're any good and they're better than me? I needed someone to personally tell me, like, John, that's the goal. That's what you want.
Yeah.
Were you comfortable with early on in terms of the finding not just the right people, but really good people?
To your point, that's when it's good to have a mentor. That's when it's good to have somebody, whether it's somebody above you in your company or whether you go out and seek it yourself, right? And I always recommend, like, you're the biggest investment, the best investment, the biggest ROI you'll ever have is yourself, right? So I definitely needed to. It took me a long time to be able to do that. I still struggle with it a little bit at times, but it took me a long time to, okay, I have these gaps. I need to hire for this, or I need to invest in myself here. But it took, I'm trying to think of the exact point. It took so I worked after I got rid of that company, got rid of it, I exited, and we ended up moving back to Vegas because I had a daughter, and I worked with a company called V-Shred, just because they let me work without a visa. And I didn't know how to do stuff like online. Like, it was all online. It was all totally virtual. Right. And I had to hire people. Right. So I would just go on their Instagram, right, and see, like, that was their resume, right? And I would go on there, and then I started doing these virtual resumes. I was like, okay, can you do this? Are you able to do that? I was just focusing on skills, right? And then I had my boss, I guess, or somebody that I worked with that had done this before. He'd scaled big teams online before. He was like when you're not in person, like, you can't feel anything, right? It's very hard to feel. You can't feel as much, right? Because even back then the pictures weren't even this clear, right? On these. Right. Yeah. So he's like, you can't let him off the hook. Right. So learning how to challenge people in a constructive way was big at that time, because
Mhm.
when I was in person, I could, because I could tell their body language, you can get a feeling for them, you could take them for a walk. Sometimes I trick people, be like,
Mhm.
hey, I need to go down to they come in for an interview, I'm like, hey, I need to go pick up my dry cleaning, you mind coming with me? And then we just go for a drive and see what the reaction would be like to come, pick up my dry cleaning. I'm like, oh wait, never mind, I forgot I don't have dry cleaning, and just see how they take it. So it's right. So you can do those kinds of things with them.
Uh-huh.
So but to be able to do that, to how to challenge people with your
Mhm.
words a little bit more, as opposed to like kind of intimidating them almost.
Right.
um that was big. So like when I would ask people back then, what is your definition of success, or what do you kind of like, what do you
Mhm.
want in your life, right?
Mhm.
And then everybody would say like, I want a lot of money, I want financial freedom, I want the
Mhm.
typical answers. It's like, okay, well,
Yeah.
why is that important to you? Like, why is that important to you?
Mhm.
Well, what's going to happen when you achieve it? Well, why is that important to you? What's the next thing you're going to want? Like challenging them, like pushing them,
Mhm.
right? And that's just an example. But I think learning to challenge people, and then again, it was really defining what we need them to accomplish to come in, and looking at
Mhm.
it from a macro, looking at it from like a community standpoint. Like, we need to bring this person in because it's better for the community. It's better, community being the organization, the company, because it's better for this, right? And having that kind of macro mindset. So when you're young, everything's right here,
Sure.
right? So it was also just how everything kind of worked as a whole,
Mhm.
right? And bringing people in, because that's truly what's better for the company. And then asking yourself, what would happen if you stayed doing what you're doing right now? Would you get the outcome you want? If the answer is no, then you have to do something different. And to get a different result, you have to do something different. So it's kind of, again, having the right mentors to kind of hit,
Mhm.
not literally hit, but smack those things into your head and give you the tools to do it. Because it's one thing to be like, hey, you need to do this, but then to develop the tools to do it, and have the questions and the gusto to ask the questions and that kind of stuff, and challenge people. That was big.
I think with entrepreneurs, honest to God, that it's like one of the toughest things that changed for me personally. I'll just speak for me. Was that sense of leaving corporate 4 years ago. It's the layers were a drag. The layers upon layers, but they really weren't for the most part, because they were the built-in mentors and you could choose appropriately. You know what I mean? It's like not everybody was a mentor, but they were there and they were really readily available. And so because they had direct skin in the game. So you talk about a moment ago when you're saying one of the best things that you've done is understand the importance of investing in yourself, uh, and in terms of finding mentors and stuff. Who are like a couple of personal favorites that you've got mentor wise? You've referenced Jim Collins, you've referenced other, but people that have worked directly, are there? And if you don't want to name their names, what were some of their traits that got you to propel forward?
Yeah. So let's see. But I know the trait. I'm trying to decide if I want to name them. So there's a group, a
Oh,
mentor
that's
group that I
okay.
work with. No,
Mhm.
there's a mentor group that I work with. It's called Pinnacle Global Network. And my mentor, his name is June, and
Mhm.
he's been through about, not been through, but he's accomplished just about everything. I'm like, hey, I'm starting a
Mhm.
podcast. He's like, oh, I taught workshops on that. Hey, I want
Right.
to do funnels. He's
Yep.
like, oh, I
Mm.
taught whatever on that. Like, he's a genius.
Mhm.
But one big things that he ingrained in me, and even just last weekend I was at a workshop, it kind of reinforced it, was like, just be just very, very comfortable with yourself. Because
Mm.
that was one thing I
Mhm.
struggled with, just because, again, like, imposter syndrome. You're like,
Yeah.
okay, well, what if myself isn't good enough? You're always like, what if,
Mhm.
what if, what if, what if? And he was like, you got to give, and this is where it kind of came, where he came up with it, or I can't remember who came up with it, somebody came up with it, was to give your past experiences the credit, because like, you've done this before.
Mm.
Right. And there's a guy that I follow, me and my partner follow pretty religiously. We go to his workshops all the time. His name's Michael Burnoff, and he talks about like communication, right?
Mhm.
The human interaction technology, and how important it is, and how important the language that you speak to yourself is. Right. So
Oh.
I was running around, saying like, I got imposter syndrome, this imposter syndrome stuff
Mhm.
today.
Mhm.
It's like you're saying syndrome as if it's like an illness.
Mhm.
Like,
Mhm.
you're defeating yourself. You're not even giving yourself a chance. He's like, how about you just say you have, you're uncomfortable with your potential, right? Like, just saying something, just changing something like that changed everything for me. So it's kind of just giving myself enough credit, and letting myself be
Mhm.
myself, right? And be creative and do things like this. So that was really big. And just, again, being cognizant of how you talk to
Mhm.
yourself, because you're your biggest influence. Like, when your conscious mind talks to your subconscious mind, like, it soaks everything in, and you don't realize it
Mhm.
until until you identify it, right? And that can take a long time. So that was a big one. Those are two big ones probably.
I love that. And you being able to become a more true version of you. Well, hell, that's the whole point of the show. So so thank
There you
you
go. You're
for
welcome.
that. But also I would say, so then you are now a part of Summit Chasers Network, and you build this, you and a partner, and it is, like I said, a lot of the heavy lifting is with two people presently, right?
Yep.
Oh my God, it's like your dad's company, like moving the house.
Exactly.
So
There it is.
what's that been like? I'm finding the fact of the matter is, because it is still, I'm going to say, at least the social media aspect of it is months in the making, not years. And folks, I find this so powerful. We're literally talking about what, September?
Yeah, about right. That's no, we're not far off.
There's some fun stuff that I am seeing in here, things that you talk about. By the way, folks, if you are on social media and you are part of Summit Chasers Network, Zach just did his own Q&A. Well, I mean, other people asked the questions. You didn't ask yourself the question, but you kind of did. You read them out loud. And I found that really powerful, really powerful. You talk at length in regards to when you're hiring people, making certain that you're articulating core values and mission statements and what have you. Question for you right off the bat would be, in more of the present and future tense, have your core values evolved? And if so, how?
Yeah, personally, for sure. Absolutely. I think maybe not the core values evolved so much. I think my understanding of them evolved, and how I adhere to them, like the importance that I place on them. Because you can, I mean, I do this with some of our clients. Like when we first start with a lot of them, they don't have that defined, and if they do, it's very loose, and they don't understand how to use them. Right, so they'll have these core values. They look good, on the meeting
Oh, they're
room
a
wall.
plaque and everything.
Yeah, but nobody follows them, right? Right? It's just like your first one up there's collaborative, but nobody talks to each other when you're making decisions. It just, but it's ingraining the importance of them and why they're so important, both in business, on sports teams, and in your personal life. Like when I was at a conference and Tom Brady was there talking, and if somebody wasn't following the core values of, and that's why New England was so good. They were never the most talented, but they had a unbreakable, in cement and steel, almost core values on their team. And if anybody broke them, he would shake their hand and be like, "I can't wait to play against you." Right? Like they had such they won Super Bowls with culture, right? And he talked at length about that, and it was very, very powerful. But yeah, my core values have, my understanding and the importance that I put in them has evolved and strengthened a lot, right? So like I have my own, like over deliver, grow or die, integrity, empathy, that kind of stuff. Like you things that you exude, who you are, right? They're like behavioral habits that you should have, and decision habits that you have, right? So I think that's the big one. It's just the importance you put on them.
I love that. You also talk about that you were reminding yourself of the fact that you must be genuinely, apparently you are, not you must be. I mean, apparently you are genuinely curious. You talked in a very recent social post, and I like that. I think I've already got the answer to the question, in the sense that I do believe that being curious obviously is a strength, but I also believe it's a strength and requires some guts. At least it did for me. It does for me, because like I'm not typically to lead with my jaw. I'm not, that never was my thing, and I just being genuinely more afraid for whatever reason. So when you are, to me, it's so empowering, because it just feels good. There's a kindness that's involved, and there's some guts that are involved. Did that evolve? And the question is, do you think that sense of curiosity is transferable, teachable, or is that just inherently a part of the DNA, or what evolved from Point Canada to Vegas to Arkansas?
Yeah, no, well, first of all, it's teachable. It's developable.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's
Mhm.
necessarily teachable. Like you can't sit here and
Mhm.
give somebody, okay, in order to be curious, here's step 1, here's step 2.
Yeah,
Right?
right.
Those steps will be different.
Mhm.
Those steps will be different for everybody, but you
Mhm.
can develop it. Everybody has some form of curiosity. We've all been kids.
Mhm.
Kids are so curious. They're sponges. And that's why they
Mhm.
learn so quickly, is because they're open to everything. They don't have these blinders on that we get as we get
Mhm.
older. Right? So it's definitely, we can develop it. We can open ourselves up to it, but you have to want to. If you don't want to,
Mhm.
then you're always going to have the blinders up. You're always going to be shut off. You're always going to think that you know everything. You're always going to discredit people because they're not saying exactly what you think the right answer is right now, or they're not, the one person that you've listened to your whole life. They're not in line with that. So
Mhm.
if you aren't genuinely, I think one of the biggest things, and just kind of coming to me now, is
Yeah.
when being curious, is you have to be empathetic, because you have to let people
Mhm.
talk. You have to let people talk. You have to care. And the more you care, the more you're going to pay attention. The more you pay attention, the more you genuinely, and when I say pay attention, I don't just mean to the words that they say,
Mhm.
but how they deliver it. Because you could say the same sentence 5 different times. It could mean 5 different things. It could mean 20 different things.
Mhm.
Right. So if you're empathetic and you genuinely care, I'm going to sit here and watch your body language. So this is going to mean something different for you than
Mhm.
it would somebody who's sitting there like a stoic. Right. So I think being curious, there's a lot that goes into it. But you can develop it.
One of the things that we try to do here is just dispel certain myths, as if, oh, that's just Zach Carlin because he's, all that, or you know what I mean? Where it's like, I love the fact that you remind that it may not necessarily be transferable, but you can definitely help somebody understand why you would want to do
Mhm.
that sort of thing. Look, you're a dad now. What would you instill in terms of those sorts of with your kids right now, in terms of whether it's those core values? I think one of them, it was integrity, and then you just
Mhm.
brought up empathy, integrity and
Mhm.
empathy, and what would you instill or want to instill, uh, with the strong hope that your kids are going to be even more successful than you?
I think it's so at this is gonna might sound crazy to some people on here. So there was
Mm,
at the certification I was at, we talked about all the different kind of archetypes, right?
right.
And there's the first three. A lot of people kind of circulate the first three, which is the orphan, the wanderer, and the warrior, right? So we're an orphan.
Mm,
We had all these bad things happen to us. Poor me, but we're
hmm.
resilient, right? We're gonna figure
Right.
it out. And then you have the wanderer, which is always like, I don't know where I belong. I'm gonna find something,
Hmm.
right? Whatever it is. And then you find something that you want, then you fight for it and you're a warrior. But the warrior, everyone's
Hmm.
like, I want to be a warrior. It's like, well, the warrior is stubborn, they're a perfectionist, and they can't get out of their own way. Right. And you can only fight for so long until you get
Hmm.
tired, and then you start feeling sorry for yourself, and then you're an orphan again. And you're like, oh, I need to figure this out. I like it better out
Hmm.
here. And I found a thing, and then I just fight for it. Where what we lost is the ability to be what we other archetype, which is like a wizard, which is to be creative, to have fun,
Mm. Hmm.
right? Have an open mind, to not rehearse everything you do before you do it, to
Yeah.
just learn by acting, just
Hmm.
act, right?
Hmm.
Just to quote a fairly big company, just do it, type of thing.
Yep.
And be creative. Don't fall for anybody's boxes that they put you in,
Hmm.
right? And you can already see it. It's kind of sad. You can see it with kids younger and younger these days, right? Where they typically, when I was growing up, 6 to 8 year olds, they were dancing. They didn't care what anybody thought.
Hmm.
These, like, even my 6-year-old daughter is kind of like, no, it's just like, I'm nervous, like I don't want to, and I'm embarrassed, kind of thing. You know what I mean? Like they're not able
Yeah.
to be their true selves, which should
Hmm.
just be silly kids that are figuring shit out, put mud in their mouth. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know what frog tastes like. Well, I mean, maybe not all frogs, but you know what I mean, right? So it's one of those things, is just don't lose that innocence,
Hmm.
right? Don't lose that innocence. Like, we should all have a warrior to back our innocence up, but we should
Hmm.
never lose it, right? And then bring that creativity, like never lose the creativity, and just like trust yourself, have faith in yourself that you can figure it out if you're just creative. A lot of times the reason we can't figure stuff out is because we don't give ourselves a chance to figure it out, because we're in a
Hmm.
box, right? So it, that's a lot to instill in kids, but that would be it. Is just always, like, be that innocent wizard that goes and just trust yourself that you're going to figure it out and be creative.
With a support system that will let them know that
Mhm.
it's fine. No, it's great to be a wizard.
Yeah.
It's
100%.
great to be with, and that's the part that I find so exciting. Zach, one more question for this round. All right, I lied too. But for the first one, how would you define authentic as it relates to you or the way that you live your life?
Ooh, authentic would be, I mean, well, this is going to be an obvious cliche one, but just not caring what other people are saying about you or doing. Like if you, like again, Patrick Bet-David's book is Choose Your Enemies Wisely. He said the worst thing you can do is let your enemies win by giving a shit that they're watching you. Right. So just don't care. Like, oh, they're spying on me to, look at my sales funnel or my market or whatever it is, like or product, whatever. Like, who cares? Who cares? If you're a wizard, you're gonna innovate and create some crazy shit that they will never be able to do anyways. Right. So just don't pay attention to that stuff, like the noise. Right. And another one is to be curious. Because I don't think anybody, if you're closed-minded, you can't be authentic. You can be authentic to what you currently know and who you currently are. But if you want to achieve something that's greater than what you are, you can't be who you are. You have to be something different, bigger, whatever, however you want that to stick in your head. So in order to be authentic, you have to be curious, because you'll never find out what your actual true authentic self is unless you're curious and going out there and doing other stuff and trying things, right? So that would be my.
I love it. Here's the last question. Will you come back again?
100%. This was so much fun.
Awesome. Zach Carlin, who, folks, as I said, this is such a rush for me, because like I said, you watch somebody that it carries themselves with such ease and grace. And I love the fact that it's reminders that it's not just an inherent, well, that's just Zach, that you've bounced and banged your head a lot to get to this point of ease and grace and confidence and just getting rolling, man, which is crazy for what you've already accomplished, to think that it feels like the trajectory is so aggressive. What's the best way to find you?
SummitChasersNetwork.com or SENGetStarted.com. LinkedIn, Zach Carlin on LinkedIn, Summit Chasers on Summit Chasers Network on Facebook and Instagram. That's the other one.
There you go. Right. Or as Zach said, when you had 10,000 followers back when he was popular, that was a big deal. Now, if you don't have 1 million,
yeah, I know.
It's an impressive thing,
but it's doable.
But you keep going. Going. Man, you inspired me today. Zach Carlin, Summit Chasers Network. Thanks so much for showing up for me. I really appreciate you.
Thank you. I appreciate it big time.
100%. Folks, you just heard another episode of Your Message Received. Keep watching, liking, listening, sharing. Tell your family, tell your friends, and we will keep driving content right through your front door. John Duffin here with Duffin Media. Have a great rest of the day, folks. Be good to yourselves, and we will talk soon. Bye.
And now, making its way across the finish line, Your Message Received has been a production of Duffin Media.